My name is Margaret Collins, and I never thought my life would end up in a place like Briarwood Assisted Living, a nursing home tucked behind a row of withered oak trees in the sleepy town of Shelby, Indiana. I'm 74 years old. I walk with a cane, not because I have to, but because my son insisted I needed one just in case. I used to make fun of women who rolled around in motorized chairs when their legs worked just fine. Now I wave at them every morning in the cafeteria line. Funny how life turns full circle, except in my case, the wheel spun faster than I could hold on to.
I wasn't always like this.
There was a time I woke up to the smell of French vanilla coffee and the sound of birds on the back porch. I used to bake banana bread on Sundays and call my son just to hear his voice. His name is Daniel, my only child. I raised him as a single mother after his father walked out on us when Daniel was just 4. I sacrificed everything for that boy. Canceled job promotions, skipped vacations, sold my wedding ring to pay for his college textbooks. But none of that matters when you're old. Or maybe it never mattered at all. At least not to him. Daniel hasn't visited in 5 months. He left me here with a polite smile, a half-empty promise, and a signature on a dotted line. "Just for a few weeks, Mom," he'd said, patting my hand like I was some fragile porcelain doll. "Just until I sort a few things out with work and the kids." The staff smiled warmly as they wheeled my suitcase down the polished linoleum hallway. The walls were painted soft beige, as if neutral colors could disguise the truth of abandonment. I waved goodbye from the window, holding back the sting behind my eyes, pretending not to notice how quickly his car peeled away from the curb. Every morning, I still get dressed properly. I brush my thinning silver hair, put on a dab of lipstick, and wear the pearl earrings Daniel gave me when he got his first real job. I sit near the lobby at 10 a.m. sharp, hoping today might be the day he walks in with coffee in one hand and guilt in his eyes. But he never comes. Instead, I watch the other residents living variations of the same loneliness. Some get calls from their children once a week, others never. There's Mrs. Jenkins, who thinks every visitor is her daughter returning from New York. And Walter, who tells the same war story every lunch, like it's his lifeline to relevance. I listen. I always listen. Maybe because I know what it feels like to be invisible. Despite the hurt, I haven't let bitterness consume me. Not yet. But I feel it sometimes, like a shadow behind my ribs. Quiet. Waiting. Growing. Something changed last Tuesday. It started with a new resident, Nina, a quiet woman in her 60s who came in with nothing but a suitcase and a pair of knowing eyes. She didn't speak much, but there's a calm about her, like she knew how this place worked. Like she'd been here before. We were assigned to sit at the same dining table. On the third day after dinner, she leaned over and said, "You don't belong here, Margaret." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "You're still holding on to something." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded and excused myself. That night, I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m., wondering what she meant. The next morning, I found something unusual in the common room, an envelope, addressed to no one, taped under one of the jigsaw puzzle boxes. Inside was a single sentence typed in neat courier font. "The truth always finds its way home." No explanation. No signature. No one saw who left it. I almost laughed, thinking maybe someone was playing a prank. But a strange chill washed over me, the kind you feel when something old inside you begins to stir. I tucked the note into my cardigan pocket and kept it with me all day. It felt familiar, like a whisper from somewhere I'd forgotten. Later that week, Nina handed me an old photo of her and her daughter, taken years ago. Her daughter hadn't spoken to her in over a decade. "She said I was too much trouble," she said with a shrug. Turns out I wasn't. She was just too selfish. Something about her words struck deep. I started writing again. Just little notes in my notebook. Letters to Daniel I'd never sent. Pages filled with things I wished I'd said. Memories of better times. Anger. Forgiveness. Everything. I hadn't written in years, but once the ink started flowing, I couldn't stop. One evening, while organizing the library shelf because I still like to keep things neat, I found a thick manila folder misfiled behind a stack of crossword puzzle books. It wasn't labeled, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it to find a series of financial documents, power of attorney forms, and copies of resident transfer records, one of them with my name. But the signature, it didn't match mine. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. That night, I didn't sleep. My world, already small, felt like it was twisting in on itself. Daniel hadn't just abandoned me. He'd trapped me. And something told me that karma had already started taking notes. The next morning, I went straight to the library. My hands were still shaking from the discovery. I checked the filing shelf again, but the manila folder was gone. Someone had either moved it or taken it. I stood there for what felt like hours, just staring at the empty space where it had been. For the first time since arriving at Briarwood, I felt afraid. Not just the slow, quiet fear of being forgotten. This was sharper, colder. It was the fear of being trapped, of knowing something was deeply wrong, and not knowing who I could trust. I tried to act normal at breakfast. Stirred my oatmeal, smiled at Walter's same old army story, nodded politely as Mrs. Jenkins insisted her daughter was visiting any day now. But my eyes kept scanning the room. Was it the nurse who had helped Daniel check me in? Was it Claire, the head of administration who always spoke too sweetly and too vaguely? Or maybe it was no one at all, and I was just unraveling. Later that day, I found Nina sitting by the window, folding origami cranes from old newspaper. She didn't look up when I sat beside her. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to," I said. She paused, her hands still mid-fold. "And now it's gone?" I nodded. She let out a slow sigh and placed the half-folded crane on the table. Briarwood has a way of swallowing things it doesn't want found. People, documents, memories. I studied her face. "Why are you here, Nina? You're sharper than anyone I've met in this place." I asked myself the same question, she said with a sad smile. Until I realized I wasn't here for me. I was here because someone thought I'd be easier to silence if I was behind these walls. "Your daughter?" She nodded slowly. A chill ran down my spine. We sat in silence for a long time before she added, "The truth always finds its way home. You just have to stay alert and careful." That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept replaying every conversation I had with Daniel before he brought me here. The way he danced around specifics. The way he encouraged me to just sign the admissions paperwork. The forced smiles. The urgency. He never let me read anything thoroughly. Was I that naive? Or just desperate to believe my son still loved me? At 3:12 a.m., I rose from bed, wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, and quietly made my way down the hall. The night nurse was asleep at her desk, drool forming at the corner of her mouth. I slipped past her and into the staff file room. Locked, of course. But I remembered the custodian, Frank, once kept a duplicate set of keys in his mop cart. It took me 20 minutes to find it. Another 5 to get inside the records room. My hands trembled with every drawer I opened. I didn't know what I was looking for, just something that would prove I wasn't crazy. I found my file. Inside were admission forms, intake assessments, and care plans. But then I found a document that stopped my heart. A power of attorney form, signed 3 weeks before my admission. Only it wasn't my signature. I had never seen that paper before in my life. Daniel had forged it. My knees nearly buckled. I quickly took out my notebook and copied down every detail, dates, witnesses, notarization stamps. I didn't dare take the document itself. I returned everything exactly where I found it, locked the drawer, and slipped out silently. By the time I returned to my room, dawn was just starting to color the horizon. The next few days, I kept to myself. I didn't trust anyone except Nina, and even then, I wasn't sure if I was putting her in danger by confiding too much. I began documenting everything, conversations, timelines, names. I hid the notebook behind a loose brick in the wall of my closet. One afternoon, I overheard Claire on the phone in the hallway. She didn't see me sitting in the reading corner. "Yes, Mr. Collins, no. She hasn't caused any trouble. Yes, we've updated the care schedule like you requested. No, there's been no sign of her cognitive decline, but we can. Yes, of course, I understand." She was talking to Daniel. She was working with him. And worse, she was managing me like I was some business account. I couldn't breathe.
Nina was right.
I wasn't just forgotten. I was being controlled, boxed away, legally silenced. I was an inconvenience. That night, I cried. Not because of the betrayal, but because I realized I had allowed this. All those years, I had raised Daniel to believe he came first. I gave him everything I had and asked for nothing in return. I made myself small so he could rise. And now he decided I didn't matter at all. But karma has a strange way of working. And as broken as I felt, something deep within me began to burn. Not with anger, but with clarity. He forgot who raised him. He forgot who made him. And now, I was going to remind him. The day I decided to fight back, I wore red. Not because I wanted to be seen, but because I wanted to remind myself of who I used to be. Red was my power color. I wore it to job interviews, to Daniel's high school graduation, even to his father's funeral when everyone else wore black. Because red said, I'm not done yet. I began with a list, names, dates, every detail I could remember. What Daniel said, what Claire said, what I saw, what I didn't sign. I folded the pages tightly and tucked them into the hem of my mattress cover, right beside my emergency stash of Werther's candies. Sweetness and war, side by side. But I needed more than notes. I needed proof. And I needed help. The only person I trusted was Nina. One afternoon, while the other residents were dozing off during their post-lunch crossword session, I pulled her aside behind the courtyard garden. I'm going to bring him down, I said. She didn't flinch. Good. About time. I just don't know how to get the documents out. They control the files. They control me. Nina was quiet for a moment, then leaned in and whispered, There's a hospice volunteer. Young woman. Comes Tuesdays and Thursdays. Her name's Rebecca. She's not like the others. She used to work in elder law before switching careers. Talk to her. I waited until Thursday. Rebecca was in the activity room, helping an old veteran build a birdhouse. She wore jeans, a navy blue hoodie, and a kindness that didn't feel forced. When I approached her, she looked up and smiled like I was a person, not a patient. I need to show you something, I said. Of course, Margaret. What's going on? I handed her a folded note with just 3 words. Please trust me. She followed me quietly to the garden. I explained everything. Slowly.
Carefully.
I showed her my notebook, the names I'd written down, the signatures that didn't match, the details I remembered. At first, she just listened, but when I mentioned the fake power of attorney and Daniel's involvement, her expression hardened. Do you still have the document? She asked.
No.
It was in the records room, but I memorized every detail. Rebecca nodded. That's enough to start. If what you're saying is true, then this isn't just unethical, it's illegal. Forging a power of attorney, manipulating a vulnerable adult, restricting access to personal property. Your son could face serious charges. I swallowed. I don't want to ruin him. I just want my freedom. Rebecca looked me dead in the eyes. He already ruined himself, Margaret. You're just telling the truth. She gave me her number and told me she'd start quietly. Pull some property records. Cross-check dates. Look into Claire's licensing. I felt hope, real hope for the first time in months. But karma doesn't like to wait patiently. The very next day, Claire called me into her office. We've had a few concerns, she began, smiling in that syrupy sick way she always did. Some of the staff have noticed you wandering at night. And I heard you've been speaking with our volunteers about inappropriate topics. I narrowed my eyes. I'm allowed to talk to visitors. Yes, but we have to be cautious with boundaries. And considering your age and your condition. What condition? I asked sharply. Claire blinked. Funny, because last month your own nurse evaluation said I'm mentally sharp and not showing cognitive decline. Did that change overnight? Her smile twitched. I'm not senile, Claire. I'm not stupid. And I know exactly what you and my son have been doing. The mask slipped for just a second. Then she straightened a stack of papers and said, You're upset, Margaret. I understand. We can schedule a wellness reassessment. I've already started one. With someone outside this building. Claire froze. I stood up, slowly, leaning on my cane with full intention. If you try to medicate me, isolate me, or touch one document in that records room, I swear to God I will make sure you never work in this field again. That night, I didn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't fear, it was fire. I wrote a letter to Daniel. Not because I wanted to forgive him, but because I wanted him to know that I knew. I didn't call him names or rage. I told him how much I loved him once, how much I gave, and how little it cost him to forget me. I ended with one line. I'm not gone, Daniel. I'm watching. The next few days were a blur. Rebecca returned with news. Daniel had sold my house 3 months after placing me in Briarwood. He had claimed I transferred ownership to him as a gift. There was no such record in my writing. The bank statements were sealed, but she was filing a petition to access them through legal counsel. The case was building. Quietly, steadily. But the walls at Briarwood grew colder. Staff gave me strange looks. My medications were suddenly adjusted. I started receiving pills I didn't recognize. I stopped taking them. I flushed them down the toilet and began eating only food I prepared myself. I told Nina, and she began watching me like a hawk. We started operating like soldiers behind enemy lines. Every move I made now came with risk. Every whisper could be overheard. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd spent my whole life playing small for people who didn't deserve my silence. And now I was finally beginning to stand. The weeks rolled into months, and I slowly found my rhythm within the walls of Rose Hill. I joined the book club, started painting again, and even taught a few yoga stretches to the ladies on our floor. My spirit refused to die, just because I had been discarded. Life, in its strange poetry, had begun to whisper new meaning into my days. Then one rainy afternoon, I overheard the nurses whispering near the front desk. Something about a tech startup crashing, people losing millions overnight. One name floated through the hallway like a ghost. Daniel. My son. I froze. I hadn't heard his name in months. Curiosity got the better of me. Later that evening, I asked Grace, one of the younger nurses who had grown fond of me, to look up the news on her phone. There it was. Daniel's company had collapsed after a massive scandal. Accusations of fraud, lawsuits pending, investor rage, and headlines calling him the golden failure. My son, the man who had once told me I was dead weight, was now facing ruin. A strange mixture of sorrow and justice flooded me. I didn't want this for him, not truly. But maybe now, he'd understand the pain of being discarded. Maybe now, he'd learn what it felt like to be alone when all you gave was taken for granted. A week later, to my disbelief, he showed up at Rose Hill. I saw him from the window first, his sharp suit replaced with crumpled clothes, hair messy, shoulders slouched like a boy who had finally met the wall he'd been speeding toward. He walked in and paused when he saw me sitting by the piano. His eyes held shame, and something else, fear, perhaps. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The room felt like it held its breath. I didn't move, didn't rush toward him like I used to when he was little and scraped his knees. I waited. I was wrong, he choked. I was so wrong. And just like that, karma had arrived, not to destroy, but to humble. He sat beside me, eyes welling up. I lost everything. Investors, friends, even Caroline left. I have nothing except memories of how I treated you. I placed my hand gently on his. Sometimes, son, life gives us exactly what we need to see what we've become. He sobbed quietly, his body shaking beside me. Forgiveness didn't come like a wave. It came like a slow, aching tide. But in that moment, I saw my little boy again. Not the CEO, not the man who walked away from me, but the child who once held my finger tightly on his first day of school. "I'm still here," I whispered. "But you'll have to find your way back. Not to me, to yourself." It started with a knock on the door. At first, I thought it was the nurse bringing in my medication. But when I turned, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize standing in the doorway. She looked hesitant, like someone approaching a stranger. But her eyes held something deeper, regret, maybe, or longing. Are you Mrs. Grace Whitmore? She asked softly. I nodded.
Yes.
That's me. She stepped inside, holding a small notebook. My name's Olivia. Well, I'm your granddaughter. I blinked. Granddaughter? I'm Mason's daughter, she added quickly. From his first marriage. He doesn't talk about me much, I know. But I had to find you. My heart beat erratically as I struggled to sit up straighter. I didn't even know he had a daughter. He doesn't claim me. After the divorce, he stopped seeing me.
But I always remembered you, Grandma.
I found some old pictures of us together. I remembered the way you used to braid my hair, the cookies you baked. I was only 5, but I never forgot. Tears welled in my eyes. My hands trembled as she came closer. I touched her face. She was real, flesh and blood. A bridge to a part of my life I thought was lost forever. I'm so sorry he did this to you, Olivia whispered. I only found out last week where you were. He told everyone you passed away. My breath caught. He told people I was dead? She nodded. Even my mother thought so. I was stunned, heartbroken all over again. How could my own son bury me while I still breathed? But as I looked at Olivia, something shifted in my soul. The ache began to ease. Maybe Mason had turned his back on me, but the universe had sent me a light in his shadow. We began talking more about the past, about her life, about everything in between. She came to visit me every day. She brought flowers, books, pictures, even a little speaker, so we could listen to old jazz records together. Laughter returned to my lips after years of silence. Then one afternoon, she brought her laptop. I want to show you something, she said.
She pulled up a website, a blog.
And right there, front and center, was a post titled, The Grandmother He Tried to Erase.
She had written about me.
About how her father abandoned me. About the cruelty of it, and the strength she saw in me. She didn't use full names, but the story caught fire.
People began sharing it, commenting,
asking questions. Soon, local reporters started calling the nursing home. Olivia had sparked a conversation about elder neglect, and I had unintentionally become the face of it. And then karma knocked. The story had legs, and it was sprinting straight toward Mason. Weeks passed, and I had settled into a rhythm of peace and healing, thanks largely to Grace, the kind nurse who had become more like a daughter to me. But little did I know, life outside the home was not going as smoothly for Eric. One afternoon, Grace wheeled me into the common room, her face unreadable. Mrs. Bennett, you might want to see this. She handed me a tablet. On the screen played a video. Eric, red-faced, being escorted out of a courtroom by 2 officers. My breath caught. The headline read, Wealthy tech exec arrested for tax fraud and elder neglect. My heart pounded as the news anchor explained that Eric's company had been audited after a whistleblower tipped off authorities about unethical financial practices. Investigators had uncovered not just corporate fraud, but also that he had abandoned his only living parent without proper legal process. That was a criminal offense in our state. I didn't report him, I whispered. I know, Grace replied softly. But someone did. A former employee of his. Said she was tired of watching him treat people like they were disposable. Karma had arrived in designer shoes and a tailored suit, and it was being marched right into a jail cell. Despite everything, I didn't feel joy watching his downfall. What I felt was justice, not revenge. Life had simply balanced itself out. A few days later, I received a formal letter. Eric's assets had been frozen, and pending legal proceedings, I was being contacted by a court-appointed attorney to discuss restitution. Ironically, the very man who had discarded me was now in a position to be legally obligated to support me. But by now, I didn't need his money. The donations from viewers of the viral interview had been more than enough to cover my living expenses at the home. Grace had even helped me set up a foundation to support other elderly individuals left behind by their families. Karma didn't just return to Eric. It elevated me in ways I could never have imagined. 2 months passed since my court appearance. The headlines faded, the reporters stopped calling, and the world moved on, but my story didn't end in that courtroom. One rainy morning, as I was helping the cook set up breakfast in the dining hall, I noticed a familiar silhouette standing just beyond the double glass doors. He looked thinner, smaller even, like life had finally started reflecting back what he had put into it. It was James. My son. I froze. My hands trembled so hard the plate I was holding slipped and shattered on the tile floor. The staff all turned to me, waiting for my cue. I didn't move.
Didn't speak.
Didn't breathe. James slowly stepped in. "Mom," he said softly, eyes watering. "I know I'm the last person you want to see." He looked nothing like the man who had dumped me here like yesterday's garbage. There were dark bags under his eyes, his beard was unkempt, and the pride he used to carry like armor had completely vanished. "I've lost everything," he confessed. "My company went under. The bank took the house. Charlotte left. Took the girls with her. I've been living out of a motel. I deserve all of it." I stood there, unsure what to feel. Pain, rage, sorrow. My heart ached to see my son broken, but it also burned from the scars he gave me. "I came to say I'm sorry," he added. "Not to ask for anything. Just to tell you that I was wrong." Silence. The other residents had quietly returned to their breakfast, but a few nurses stood nearby, watching carefully. James saw the distance in my eyes. He stepped back, as if preparing himself for rejection. And I should have turned away. But I didn't. Instead, I walked toward him, my old legs trembling with each step. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "I prayed for karma, not revenge. And I see now she did her job." He swallowed hard, nodding in shame. Then I placed my hand gently on his arm. "You lost everything, James. But you're here. You showed up. That means something. Maybe it's not too late for you to start again the right way." Tears streamed down his face, and for the first time since he was a boy, he hugged me. Not out of obligation or show, but from the depths of remorse.
I didn't move in with him after that.
I wasn't some forgotten old woman desperate for a place to stay. I had my own life here, built by my own hands. But we talked more. He came to visit weekly, helped out at the center, slowly earning back the trust he shattered. And as the days turned to months, something inside me healed. Karma didn't just punish him. She reminded him, reshaped him. And she reminded me that even the deepest wounds can find peace when we're ready to forgive and when the other is willing to atone. The day of the gala arrived. I stood before the mirror, draped in a deep navy blue gown tailored to my every curve, my silver hair pinned up in soft waves. The reflection staring back wasn't a forgotten old woman anymore. It was Evelyn Barnes, the heart behind Rosewood Revival, the symbol of second chances. When I entered the ballroom with Richard by my side, the room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, journalists scribbled notes, and I smiled. Not just for the press, but because I had finally reclaimed myself. Halfway through the evening, a commotion stirred near the entrance. I turned my head and saw him. Ryan. He stood there in a wrinkled shirt, no tie, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. His fiancée, Amber, wasn't with him. I heard later that she left him after learning the truth about how he abandoned me and then tried to sue me for money. Karma had knocked. He walked up slowly, hesitant. "Mom." "Evelyn," he said, as if unsure which role I now belonged to. "Ryan," I replied, my tone calm but distant. I didn't know you were doing all this. I saw the news. The center, the foundation." I'm sorry." I nodded. "I know. Can we talk sometime?" he asked. "Maybe fix things?" I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt or anger. Just peace. "Maybe," I said softly, "but you'll have to earn that." Before he could say more, the host called my name to the stage. The room filled with applause again, and I turned away from the boy who had once broken me, now just a man learning what it means to lose. As I stepped up to the mic, lights glowing down, I smiled. I used to think being abandoned was the end of my story. I began. But it turns out, it was only the beginning. And so, What began as a tale of betrayal ended as a powerful lesson in redemption, resilience, and karma. Charlotte, once left alone and discarded like yesterday's memory, found herself surrounded by warmth, purpose, and newfound family, not the one bound by blood, but by love, respect, and second chances. Her son, Ethan, faced the very isolation he once inflicted. But Charlotte? She rose. She healed. And most importantly, she forgave, not because he deserved it, but because she did. This story reminds us all. You may be abandoned by people, but you'll never be abandoned by destiny. Because karma sees everything. And when the time is right, it acts. Betrayal may hurt, but it can also awaken the greatest transformation. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales that prove you can rise, no matter how hard you're pushed down. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and trust that karma never sleeps.